Welcome to the GoodViral podcast.
We believe that people can and want to do more to help others.
So we invite you to join the conversation about the small and large ways that we can help people, animals, and the planet. We'll talk about real stories, like the turtle who had a straw stuck up its nose and how the video went viral in 2018 and changed the course of businesses like Megacorp Disney to change their straws to paper. We'll exchange exciting ideas and meet with guests who are actively making a positive impact with their time on this earth.
You don't have to do much to inspire a lot. Through this podcast, we want to make things easier for people like yourself to get involved.
When good goes viral, the world gets better.
On another episode of GoodViral, we are so excited to bring you Tayo Rockson. He's a writer, speaker, consultant, podcaster, professor, and brand strategist who runs UYD Management, a strategic consulting firm that helps organizations incorporate sustainable diversity and inclusion practices. As the son of a diplomat, Tayo grew up understanding the nuances of multicultural diversity while living on 4 continents. He has leveraged his experiences to establish himself as an authority in communicating effectively across cultures and personal branding by gracing various stages, including TEDx and the prestigious United Nations. Lastly, Tayo's most recent accomplishments include writing the bestseller Use Your Difference to Make a Difference and launching the national anti-racism campaign called #Let'sTalkBias. Thank you so much, Tayo, for being part of the GoodViral podcast. I'm here with Demian, my co-host here, and we are so excited to have you on here because you really bring a lot of the humanitarian aspect of what GoodViral's mission really wants to accomplish. So thank you so much for being here and spending time with us, because you are currently in New York City, the hurricane recently, right?
Yes. The remnants of the hurricane. Yeah, unfortunately, the tri-state area, Jersey, New York, even Pennsylvania, a lot of places have been affected. And of course, Louisiana. Yeah,
right.
Forget that. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I'm glad it looks like you're safe. So we're glad that you're safe from such a crazy storm that occurred.
Yes, thankfully.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a question for you. So
yes.
We were talking about this before, and I thought it'd be a great way to talk to you, to hear what you have to say. Is so when you first started, you've done now a lot of speaking. Now you're very involved in social media. When you first got started, what was it that really sort of gave you that idea, that push to say, "Hey, this is what I want to do. Is I want to get out there and give this message and reach people." I mean, what started that for you inside?
I always think life is a series of journeys, and I think you get those hints throughout your life. And I'm Nigerian, for those that don't know. And the first decade of my life was spent in and out of 2 military dictatorships and 3 military regimes. And so I was always aware of what it was like to be in an area where you feel suppressed and oppressed. And so I've always had that idea and desire to fight for justice in some shape or form. In fact, the late Nelson Mandela was my biggest inspiration. And I remember him, gaining power and him being, South Africa's first Black president and all those things. So those things were in the back of my head. But biggest catalyst for me was probably, I want to say, August 22, 2012. It was a year removed from graduation from college, and I was in a job I didn't like. It was in a town I didn't want to live in Lynchburg, Virginia. And no shade to Lynchburg, Virginia. It definitely helped build some of my character, but it was I felt like it was too small for what I was trying to do. But I resigned to this idea that I would be here. I'm not a citizen, whatever the visa jobs give me options are. So I was there. And then I got into this car accident on that day, August 22, 2012. And it was a car accident by all intents and purposes that I wasn't technically supposed to survive. At least I was supposed to be injured. But for some reason, I didn't get injured, and my car was totaled. There were 2 other cars hit. It was in the middle of the highway, other cars zooming. And that was a big wake-up call for me, because it really forced me to examine where I was at that point in my life and if I was doing what I wanted to do. Like, when you face your mortality, you have all these questions that come to mind. Like, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? I almost died. And so I wasn't satisfied with the answer. And that began the journey for me to move to New York City and to really just quit. First of all, I needed to quit the job and to redefine what success meant to me. And I started sharing more of my writing and podcasting shortly thereafter, which led to the whole career that I have right now.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I love about that is you're not giving shade to the small town. I'm also from a small town. So I like very small town. So I totally get this idea of I want to grow. I want to do something more. And there's this message inside that's just crawling to get out. And you decided I'm going to make the leap. And you literally did to the Big Apple, the biggest leap here in the United States, I feel like sometimes. So just want to kind of give a lot of kudos to that, because from going from such a small place to such a big place, not only the expenses and how different that is, but even culturally different. So I know I follow you a lot on TikTok, and I feel like that's a great place for a lot of, especially younger people, to go and hear a lot of your messages. So when you do this big leap over to, New York, I'm kind of wondering, did you start to feel like your message kind of started to go deeper and deeper and you really wanted to get it out there more and more? Or kind of tell us a little bit of how that escalated for you.
So I've always loved big city. I'm from a big city, actually, in Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos, Nigeria is the equivalent to New York here. And so when you grow up, I grew up as a son of a diplomat. So I ended up growing up in 5 countries and 4 continents. So I was just pretty good at adjusting and moving into new places. I went to boarding school. I went to all these places. But at that point in my life, I was so hungry. Because I think, I don't know. I feel like I was awakened to the possibility of just more. Before that accident, my biggest fear was failure. And after the accident, my biggest fear was not achieving my potential. And I just saw how much potential could come from sharing my story. I'd always been a writer and all those things, but I would keep my stories to myself. And then, so yeah, I moved to New York City. And if you're not a citizen, it's either school, work, or marriage. So I was going to quit my job, and I wasn't in a relationship. So I went to school. which helped a lot of my parents loved the idea of advanced education, and so I applied to schools, got conditionally, not fully, conditionally accepted into Fordham, and I just took the leap anyway. And there I'd already started writing. I've always been a fan of digital media, because to me, especially as an immigrant, I was always looking for an equalizer, and if I didn't have the citizenship, I felt like being able to mold my story was a good advantage. So I got my domain, and I would start to share stories. I didn't know what to write about exactly. I was doing random interviews with people that I admired, and I love sports. So I was also trying to do that as well. But I found a niche when I came across this article that basically was a BuzzFeed article. It was something to do with signs you're a third culture kid. And for those that don't know what a third culture kid is basically anyone that, spends formative periods of their lives outside of, the parents' cultures. They could be immigrants, they could be, the diplomatic kids like me, army brats, or any of that. And so, there are all these memes before memes were popular about, thinking in different time zones, code switching, all these things. I felt at home, and I thought to myself, this is exactly who I am. I've always confused people where I'm from. And so I latched onto that identity of TCK and really became a voice for that. I was starting to say, well, these are the positive aspects of it. This is how you deal with homesickness. This is how you get a job, is that. And then that dovetailed into the whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it was a journey for me as I was, going to school at night and writing. I started to get emails back from people who said, hey, I didn't know about this. I feel heard, seen, and understood. And it gave me that inspiration to continue. And then the podcast came in 2014 when I felt like I could do it. And then, then people started asking me to speak. And then I launched a consulting firm shortly after that.
So, because I've been watching some of your stuff online, and it's and I love the messages and everything. But the one thing that I've been trying to understand is what would you say is sort of the main message for you that's the most important? Or to put it a different way, what is it that you're currently working on that you feel like is the most important thing that you want to share, that you want to get out there, or that you want to do right now?
Well, my mission statement and the title of my book, or anything that I do, is called Use Your Difference to Make a Difference. The entirety of my job is to fight against any system of oppression and oppression. So
Mhm.
whether I describe myself as a culture translator and a polymath in progress. So I'm always doing multiple things, but under the umbrella of it, whether it's me being a professor, I'm teaching students how to communicate effectively across cultures. Me being a writer, doing the same thing. With companies, I'm working with them on creating safe spaces for people to be themselves. As a researcher, it's the same sort of thing. So any of the things that I've sort of applied, the skill sets that I've learned and acquired, is all centered around embracing the best parts of humanity and finding out how to limit those barriers, whether it's racism or any of the isms. And so my work and life's mission is to change our relationship with difference and to enhance that in a way that is, allows for multiple homes. I feel like we've limited the range of humanity based on whatever systems we uphold today. And so, I mean, that's the bigger goal. It's just to encourage people to embrace the difference and to use that to make a difference.
Knowing your bias, that's always something I'm hearing you talk about,
Yeah.
especially on TikTok and stuff like that. And that seems to be a resonating series that you put out there.
Yeah.
So when it comes to knowing your bias, couple questions to this for our listeners is, what is that? And then what are one or two things that they can do, easily in their day, or maybe not easily, but simply in their day-to-day life to really help enforce that, to really make a ripple effect of change?
Well, I think I know everybody's biased in some shape or form, but I don't know that everybody knows their bias. And I think that if some people know their bias, they might be ashamed of their bias. But I like to move past that conversation where, obviously our biases are not necessarily good or bad. They protect us, right? That's how we know how to navigate a life. But I do feel like we each have opportunities to expand our worldview. And I think worldview is basically a combination of your lived experience and like what you're exposed to. And if you're reflecting on your bias, or someone's thinking about how to reflect on the bias, I always encourage them to reflect on their lived experiences. Who are their three best friends? Where are the last three places they've lived in? Last three relationships. What are the commonalities that exist there? And also, how do they make decisions on who they interact with, where they go to school, and what they buy? Those things inform us about what we consider valuable to us. And I, even if we're just using the last 2 years, I think it's very clear to see that once the world stopped for a little bit, or was in a little bit of at a standstill, you see that some of your best impulses and worst impulses come out, right? You start reacting to certain things based in politics, religion, or whatever defines your worldview. And if you are comfortable with that decision, this is what I always say in my videos, you're one of those few people that doesn't need to grow. But if you find opportunities to grow, it is an opportunity to grow. That is what it is. It's an opportunity to grow, and you should take that. And I think most people stay in that shame, guilt place without realizing that there is still an opportunity to grow that doesn't necessarily need the validation of other people. And so that's what I usually try to promote with that, because I think I think self-awareness and critical thinking are two of the skills that we don't teach in school. Mm-hmm. Ironically, the two of the most important skills that we need to learn in order to interact with the world that we've created by our actions and inactions today.
And when you say critical thinking, and what you mean, like self-critical in terms of looking at ourselves, or what do you mean when you say that?
That would be the self-awareness part. The critical thinking is, I think we live in a more reactive world as opposed to reflective world. I don't know that sometimes we take information that's given to us without critically assessing it. Or where is this coming from? What is the source? Show me your work. Like, in school, show me your work or cite your sources. And a lot of times that leads to misinformation and disinformation. If you look at history, when it's been said through one lens, it almost makes it look like there wasn't any contribution from Black and brown folks. But if you're critically thinking through the narrative of that, I mean, it's impossible. So to see that, but that's still in textbooks. You just get the information like, I can learn that in school, and that's that. But if we don't critically assess those things and critically understand what could have been the motivations of different people, I think it's hard for people to see each other as full human beings because that wouldn't influence your bias. I know when I first came to the States, people were always surprised that I could speak English because they had to study colonization, or they were surprised that, I looked the way I did it because they thought people darker than me were the only people that lived in the continent, like all these things. And they used to make all these clicking noises and everything. But the idea is if you don't critically think through information that is given to you, it's hard for you to grow, honestly.
So when it comes to these, like, know your bias, there's the awareness piece, there's the opportunity piece, and using the opportunity, really using critical thinking. My question is, for our listeners here today, they're probably understanding, okay, knowing my bias can really change the trajectory of a situation or an area or my workplace or my business itself. When it comes to even, I guess that you kind of put it out there a little bit, so I'm going to highlight it, is this idea that people tend to dehumanize others. And it's a way to really push away something that you don't want to deal with, or you have a controversy with the idea, not that person per se. And it tends to come into dehumanizing them. So how, tell us a little bit more of the risks of what can happen maybe in one person's life, or, it could be like a catastrophic world event, whatever it may be, when it comes to continuing to, be in the unknowingly dehumanizing others.
So I think it all stems from the fact that we don't have a culture of accountability. In fact, I think we reward bad behavior so often that it is so uncool to, quote unquote, do the right thing. Now, all of us on this call know that what is normal and what is standard is all relative based on how you grew up. But a lot of times, if you look at any of the codes, guy code, girl code, whatever, fraternity, sorority, or this is national, whatever, any of these things, sometimes they are protect the blue wall, of silence. Any of these things, they have some good intentions. I'm not denying that there aren't any good intentions here, but a lot of times when they are taken to the extreme, they are protecting someone simply because of their membership, and the membership of that group is based on whatever arbitrary thing we've decided, whether it's gender identity, occupation. And the thing that I'm challenging here is that, yes, membership is great. I think that's part of humanity. We're primed to connect, but we need to also add a level of accountability there, because as the times grow, so do standards, right? And the problem exists when the standard that we're operating under maybe a few years ago is the same thing we're using as people evolve. And then we get into this crossroads where people feel like you're taking away tradition. And I don't think all tradition is meant to be kept. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting paradox, because if that was the case, women wouldn't be voting right now. Unfortunately, we'll be having all these types of oppression, of enslavement, and multiple things. But at some point, we all knew that those things had to change. And so that is the point of me bringing that part up, whether it's with the awareness and critical thinking, is because more information came and we decided to change with that. We evolved, we decided to change as we got more information. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's usually the perspective of where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to take away anyone's sense of identity, but I'm also trying to make sure that people understand that you might be so sure about something now, but you don't understand how limited it can be for the whole of humanity. And history is there as a framework.
So this brings us to what I think is sort of the most important question, because I think what you're talking about is very universal, and that everybody can relate to many of the things. But also, even when you're speaking, I mean, I consider myself a pretty smart person, but there's so much that you're saying that I'm following you as closely as I can just to get it all. So if somebody wants to, if our listeners want to support what it is that the message that you and your mission, in any way that they feel like they want to be involved or support or be part of what you're doing, then how can they do that, or what do you recommend that our listeners do?
Well, you're far too kind. My digital home is TayoRockson.com, so TayoRockson, so Rockson, Tayo Rockson. You can follow me at Tayo Rockson on social media, or you can buy the book. I have a book called Use Your Difference to Make a Difference, and I talk how I speak, and I speak how I write, and I write how I talk. So it is written in a way for you to follow and to be part of the conversation. And in the book, I explain framework for how to effectively connect across culture. And I like to provide information and give you opportunity for action. And so there are many reflective exercises there. But everything that I do is, if you search Tayo Rockson, is on the platform, the podcast, the book, lectures, any of that. They're all there.
So, I have one question that I've kind of been thinking about through this whole interview. And it's, where is your message and your mission, I guess, going? What's the real, I guess you could, these are all goals and these are all things we really, really want to hit. And some people might feel like they're lofty, right? And some people are like, let's do this. So what's let's do this kind of goal that you have when it comes to this mission of letting go bias and just humanize people, as well as ending oppression in whatever form that may be? What are those real goals that you have?
I mean, those are pretty big goals there to limit the oppression and suppression we have, and to expand the range of humanity that we allow to exist, right, in today's world, and to expand worldviews. Now, those might seem like vague, lofty ideals, but I really feel like the fact that we spend most of our time in a workplace of some sort or some education institution of some sort, and the fact that people are the people that occupy these institutions, means that it's either a recipe for disaster or success. Now, if we're molding the next generation of leaders, which is the ultimate goal, to build the next generation of leaders, what are we modeling? Are we modeling bad behavior or good behavior? One of the reasons Ted Lasso or Superman or, This Is Us or Randall Character or any of these type of shows that highlight and model positivity are favorites of mine, simply because they show that it's okay to just do the right things, even in moments of disaster, because those things, while they might not have been modeled as sexy, are still able to allow us to discover ourselves in a better way. And I feel like we don't have enough of that in our books, in our characters, in our media, in our teachers, in our leaders. And so my hope is just that leadership is modeled in a way where people understand the mistakes are part of life, but picking ourselves back up and trying to see someone for who they really are is still the best way to try and solve the biggest problems we have today. Because I'll tell you this, I'll end with this. My biggest fear is that we have so many things happening now at an intersection. Whether you look at COVID, you look at climate change, or you look at all the isms and that are happening right now. Digital media is giving us this idea of inundation, right? We have all this news coming to us at the same time, and a lot of people are feeling hopeless. But I do want to remind people that hope is still there, but it just means we have to have that type of patience and willingness to see a big picture of where this goes, even if it doesn't happen on our watch, but have the faith to carry it on to the next generation that we are modeling this good behavior for. So it's a big goal in that sense.
A last quick question then is, because I'm thinking, what we're about with GoodViral is more than anything, I think we've identified as the conversation. As we want to get people, involved in the conversation and just talking with each other. And I think that you would agree when we're talking about going across any barriers or biases that we might have, just to simply talk to each other and just start opening up those communications, so forth. But I'm thinking about, like you in your example, whether you're at a company, school, whatever it is, and let's say that you have just a moment and you're sitting right there next to somebody that, you're imagining, again, our listeners standing or sitting there right next to somebody with a few moments just to talk about anything. And if we're going to invite them to have a conversation, and what is it that you think that for them, based upon what it is that the message that you're sharing, what do you think is the conversation that you would like people to be having?
Well, the conversation I'd like people to have is whether they feel seen, heard, and understood for who they really are. As simple as that. If anyone is listening to this, I'll invite them to ask themselves that. And if they do, the next question after that is, do the people around them feel seen and heard and understood for who they really are? When you ask yourself that and you figure out the answer, and then you ask the people around you, or you figure out without asking, however you find out the answer, there are many clues as to opportunities for change. If you're a CEO and you find out that people don't feel safe enough to be themselves because of whatever reason, it's an opportunity for you to redefine the work culture. If you're a teacher and you ask that, same thing. If you're a partner, you ask your wife, spouse, or any of that, same thing, boyfriend, girlfriend, any of that. And if you're a leader or if you're a friend, when you start asking yourself those things, what you're going to find is the information is there. And you're going to have to really work on the idea of whether you want to be a part of the solution or not. And I think people often think that the idea of changing the world only stops solely at those that we've elected, right? Or the people that are there. But it's in our backyards, it's above our two shoulders and between our ears, right? If we do the work to really see our neighbors, then we understand our neighbors. It is not easy, but it is simple in that sense. Mm-hmm. And so that's if there's any takeaway, that's all I want. Find out what makes everyone around you feel seen, heard, and understood for who they really are.
I loved all the mic drops we just experienced in like half an hour. That was great. Okay. Well, thank you, Teo, for being on the podcast. We really appreciate your time here and how people can really take steps in their own lives of how they can not only be seen, heard, and feel like they matter, really, right? But how they can do that to others as well. And how we can all tie around this, around the whole globe too. So thank you for being part of the podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me, both of you. And thank you for really trying to make sure that good goes viral. I've always been a fan of that concept. And so, it's a pleasure to have been talking with you, Damien and Anastasia.
Thank you for listening to the Good Viral podcast and being part of the conversation. If you are inspired by this episode, go to our website at goodviral.org, where you can find resources and listings from the episode to continue good efforts.
Like, comment, and share this episode to any or all of your social media channels. It's really easy to take a small action, and maybe you'll inspire a big result.
When good goes viral, the world gets better.